So let's kick off our Women in Tech series with Shani Banerjee.
Yeah.
She's currently at Zoobean, so I've heard. So, Shani, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Zoobean, and maybe even some background on how you got to your position now?
Yeah. So I actually started like even before I got into software development. I was working in restaurants, and I happened to be working in a restaurant where they asked me to alpha test an app called No Wait, and so after alpha testing that and literally being one of like the first like surveys for that app, a few years later a friend of mine started working for them in marketing, and said that they had a customer support role open. And so that was kind of where I started like my tech journey, was actually in customer support. And it was funny because I really thought, I have like my background is actually in art, and so I think I always thought I was going to be like a designer of some sort. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, well, if I move into tech, like probably going into like UX or UI. So I ended up doing a certificate in user experience design, and just trying to go in that direction kind of after customers like being burnt out on customer support. But then I realized like once I would, design something or like design a site, or an app, I just wanted to like know how it worked. So I was like, well, wait, hold on. Now this button, like this button exists kind of in the world, but like, how do I make the button do something? And so
Right.
that's when I really started looking into web development as as a job. And so I ended up going to a boot camp, and it was, it was a lot of work in like a very short amount of time. So eventually, I ended up doing an apprenticeship, and then after that I ended up becoming a junior developer at Luma Institute through PS Solutions. And then after a year there, I was recruited by Zoobean. And so I'm a full stack developer, and we have a Ruby backend, which I really love working in Ruby. I think that's probably where I like being the most. Even, like I said, even though I have this art background, like I really am not super keen on the front end. But especially working in educational tech companies now, it's been really rewarding. And there's just I think just understanding how an application fits together. And also, like, when I was working customer support, we had an application that was being accessed like 24/7, across the US. And so it's kind of nice to have like a little bit like the applications are that I've been working on are a little chiller. So I really like that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, there's a couple things that you mentioned that I'd like to touch on. So first, I know that you said that you have an arts background, which is awesome. I'm totally into arts and graphic design and all of that. And as we're like, from working at PS Solutions, I didn't realize the opportunities and the career paths that you can take the arts and turn into, the tech industry.
Mhm.
So could you explain a little bit more? I think that there'd be some girls that would like to hear maybe if they are interested in that graphic design, some opportunities and maybe some things that you've learned along the way from that aspect, just having that background.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the longest time I was like, oh, I can't, like, oh, because I'm an artist, like I won't get computer science for some reason. And that's just like not true at all. Ultimately, so actually my background is specifically in photography and film photography. So like I was not only was I like doing something that was like not even digital, like it was like very, it's a dying breed. Also, sorry
Right.
if there's dogs everywhere in my house. So if you hear jingles or barks, that's what's going on. So yeah, so I think initially, I just kind of assumed that like I wouldn't be good at programming for some reason, but I realized that it's really logic based, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of like understanding, learn. Um, whether it's painting, like, or photography, like, developing film, printing it, you really have to go through steps in order to do something. You can't just like, obviously you're not going to have like a painting and then all of a sudden it's going to turn into, a graphic or something. You
Mhm.
need to go through these processes to get something to where it needs to be. And so that's really what all computer science is. That's all programming is telling something to do something in a specific order. And once you understand what the kind of foundational elements to that is, it's really easy to just really understand how to kind of plug in to that. So yeah, it was kind of surprising, but I realized that it made my brain really work for problem solving.
Mhm.
And I think that's where, like, in a lot of other roles where, you know, obviously I can talk to people, like customer support came really naturally because I'd been in the, you know, restaurant industry for so long. So I was used to helping people. And that felt really great. But I just kind of noticed that, like, I felt like I wasn't really getting to do everything that I wanted to do, and like ask, you know, questions and try to figure out how things work. I was just kind of trying to diagnose people's problems, and then I would hand it off to somebody else to solve. So yeah, I think that's what really like ended up tying together all of my background skills. And I didn't know that it would be something that, you know, they would want to see in a developer. And I always say, kind of like, I might not be like the best software developer in the world, but I think these other elements of understanding like how a product works, how people really interact with a product, those user experience elements, you know, there's a lot more that goes into an application than just somebody, you know, boo beeping, as they like to call it.
Right, right. No, and I love that you say that, because I think something that I've learned, and going back to your point of this problem solving, having that creative mindset, and maybe not necessarily using that creative arts for actually like pen and paper, but to use that creative mindset that you might use to create the art, but to create it to solve a problem, you know. And with
Yep.
technology advancing every day and the innovation behind it, I think it's necessary to have that creative mindset, you know. So it's really awesome to see what you can do and with the technology that you have. Um, so I think that's awesome. Another thing that you touched on, a boot camp. So we're interested in kind of sharing some resources, some different classes that these different women have taken. So in your boot camp, did you take any specific classes that you were like, yes, this is it? You that you still remember to this day? Anything like that, or any type of resources that you had during that boot camp that has helped?
So the way the boot camp was structured was like, it was just like 9 to 5, like it's your job basically, and you go in and they really start you from a foundation of like, hello world, like this is how a program works, like in a black box. And then we like started expanding into you know, front end, so HTML, CSS. So I think those foundational elements to just like how, you know, the internet was built essentially is really
Mm-hmm.
important to understand. So even if you're just doing some like HTML, CSS stuff, it's really important. And there's also a lot of like, you know, if you use like WordPress, for example, WordPress is written in PHP, so you could learn that language, but there's also, you know, it's also a CMS, it's a content management system. So you're working with things that are already built and then having them fit together. So there's a lot of ways to kind of explore like that calling, I guess.
Right.
And so I think once I realized that there were so many options in terms of like how you can apply technology, like I kept wanting to kind of dig further and further. And that's when, you know, and even when I was like working initially, I don't think I fully understood like what is back end, what is front end. Like when I was in my apprenticeship, I think I was still a little bit, you know, like you're afraid kind of to touch this code that is like literally people, you know, hundreds of people are using it a day. So you don't want to be the one to break it.
Right, right.
But but I would say that understanding like where I wanted to go really helped me like figure that out. So I tried a little bit of everything, as far as like learning like how a web application works, and then started really saying, okay, I want to learn this more and get deeper into this. And so while I'm kind of like a generalist, like I can do a lot, you know, overall, I'm personally trying to really understand, you know, back end optimization and making sure that we have, you know, really, you know, fast working and accessible applications. And so I think, yeah, those are the things I really took with me, was like just doing a little bit of everything. So you kind of feel out where you're at and then diving into something a little bit. And so I would say learning a specific language is really, really important to that. So JavaScript, I think, is one of the most dynamic languages that you can learn. It's kind of ever present. It's always, as soon as JavaScript was created, it really added flexibility for developers. And I think a lot of front end developers who are, mostly just like in HTML, CSS, jQuery, all of a sudden they really had this power to be able to do a lot more back end computation really with JavaScript. And so that's why I really like it. And there's a bit of a learning curve to it, but once you get it, you're like, yay, I really love it. And you see how powerful it is. So I would absolutely suggest for anybody who's first starting out to learn JavaScript, and then to learn actually Java, or a low level language like C or C++ in the back end. Even before Ruby, I think. I started playing with Java a little bit, but I ended up really liking Ruby just because to me there's a friendliness to it as a backend language that I feel like some other languages don't. Like Python can be a little bit too dry for me. So I definitely really love Ruby. But I would say if you are also looking to kind of do something in the future with like AI or machine learning, this kind of like these emerging technologies are really reliant on Python. So I would say if you're kind of curious about also like the ethics of all of that, like we really need women to be a part of the product design and the discussions that are going into the development of products that are AI based. Because ultimately, if you don't have women at the table there, these products are going to not be really made with women in mind as a result. So
right. So a question that comes to mind, and after speaking to a couple other women, we kind of discussed back and forth, where should we start? What should we be doing differently to get these younger women interested in tech? And there's some discussion that we said, how we're taking these foreign languages, either Spanish, French, whatever, in high school, college. Should these educational institutions should they have classes that also have this computer science language as well? What, like, as a need?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it does function really similarly, like I think knowing multiple languages really helped me understand, how to learn. It's a written language ultimately. It's not a spoken language. But you do have to really know like those mechanics of like where something goes and why it goes there, right? There's rules. And absolutely, like those should be taught side by side. So as long as at least so like some foundational elements to it. Like I remember when I was like maybe in like 6th grade, there was this like website. It was like for kids, and you can like push stuff. Like you kind of had your own little like space that you could like play around with things. And I remember learning the hex codes for colors, and I didn't know that that's what I was doing when I was like playing. When I realized I could affect change in just like this little program that I was like playing in, just to put up like a cartoon of something, or like write a little paragraph. And I remember I think I was saying something disparaging about my science teacher. And I think I got in trouble with my mom because she was like, whatever you put on the internet is going to stay on the internet. So like if you say something mean about your science teacher and she reads that, she's going to be mad at you. I was like, so that was also a very important lesson learned. Remember that the internet is forever. Even when you think you delete something, it's still there somewhere. So yeah, so it was just funny that I was like plugging in these things and playing with code and HTML and CSS at that time, and I didn't even know that's what I was doing, right? I didn't have the language to do that. So I'm kind of bummed because it was never really pushed in high school. Like I would have probably got into computer science a lot earlier if I had known that. And also I think like just straight up, like being able to find a job is hard. Finding a well-paying job is difficult. And I think that at the end of the day, if you want, I'm just going to be frank, if you want money, if you want nice things, if you want to not worry about student loans, if you want to make sure that you can retire, go into tech and just find a place in it. Because I know, I think that's sometimes what we lose sight of is like this idea that a job has to be like super like emotionally fulfilling, and it doesn't. It's 40 hours of your week. However you want to spend those 40 hours is up to you, but I don't know. I think that this idea that we need to like dream super big about occupations is like
Mhm.
silly. Like to me, I'm also a musician, I'm also an artist. Do I do that 40 hours a week? Not necessarily. Does that make me any less of those things? No.
No.
So I think it's like how you want to spend your time and how you want your quality of life to be. So to me, like one thing that was really freeing was that I didn't have to rely on a relationship. I didn't have to rely on my family. Um, I got to be really independent with the money that I started making in tech. And that's really one of the reasons why I like push, people to get into it, is because you all of a sudden you have a lot of autonomy and a lot of choice for your life.
Right, right. No, that's amazing. Would you say that that's the most fulfilling part of your career, or or is something else that you say, oh man, like I feel fulfilled, like I love what I'm doing? What would you say to that?
I mean, I think I always was somebody, I like never knew what I wanted to do. I
Hmm.
never, when I was like 6, I think I said I wanted to be a lion tamer. Like obviously not a lion tamer.
Yeah.
However, I do have a kitty. Uh, but um, you know, again, like there's this idea that you have to be something forever. Like
Mhm.
once you make this decision, you can't go back. And at the end of the day, like the way I feel about tech, honestly, what's really fulfilling about it is the fact that I can walk away from it at any day. Like sometimes I'm like, I miss the service industry. Like I know that I can always go back to being a bartender. I can always go, there's so many options all of a
Right.
sudden. And so I think that's actually what's like really fulfilling, is like knowing that I don't have to keep doing something if I don't want to.
Right.
Also, just like I like the problem solving. I like
Mhm.
what it requires of me throughout the day. I like making my brain like think. And for some people, that's what they want out of a job. For other people, they just want to be able to clock in and clock out. And the
Right.
thing is, like, neither of those mentalities is more virtuous than the other. Like
Mhm.
the idea that you have to like bootstrap and prove something, that's all BS. Like at the end of the day, a job is a job. How much
Right.
money you want to make you know, at the end of the week or the month or year is really, I think, what can be a driver for it. Yeah.
Right. Right. So what is it like being a woman in tech? As you know, I'm sure, even myself working at PS, and I love it. I'm one of the only females in the room, often, working with other male software developers and other leaders on our team. And it seems like there's less women in the tech, where maybe 10 years ago there were even less, but now, so
Yeah.
it's great to see that, it's improving and women are getting out there. But what has it been like being a woman in tech?
It's funny because I think in some ways, like you definitely have to be resilient.
Hmm.
I I mean, I think it is improving vastly. Like, and I have so many great mentors who are women. But I also work with a lot of men who have created more space. And I think they see the inequity, they see the value add that is there by having, a more dynamic and diverse, group of people working
Hmm.
on something. Ultimately, again, just going back to that concept of like ethically, like if you don't have people of color, if you don't have women, if you don't have people of different genders, and marginalized genders, if you don't have those voices in the room, then you're really not making a holistic product. You're not making the product the best that it can be. So it's kind of like you're failing at your job before you're even starting at it. Like, I think there's this idea that I don't know. I think we as women have been told over time, like, oh, this is too technical for you. Like,
Hmm.
don't don't worry about it.
Right. I think a lot of it too is in middle school, it's like, oh, that's more of like the nerdy, nerdy route. And then high school, it's like, oh, I'm not sure. Like, I'll do it if you do it. And then college, it's like, okay, what are the opportunities? Once I'm in the field, what do the opportunities even look like? Can I rank myself up to leadership? Is that an option for me?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of girls are that they're unsure.
Well, I mean, it's also like those jobs are not really modeled,
Hmm.
like I never in my life was I like, oh, maybe I could be a CTO. And the thing is, I could be a CTO. Like
Right.
I could do any of those things. Is that what I want to do? I'm not entirely sure if I want that kind of responsibility. But I think a lot of those roles, like if you don't see those jobs, like how are you supposed to know they exist? I feel like
Right.
exposure is so much of it. So it's really like being curious, being the squeaky wheel, asking questions, and then it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be people who put you down. There's going to be people who say you're not good enough. I remember one time I had a manager who told me that I should really learn how the internet works. And it was because I like choked on a question that he asked me, and I just like I knew the answer, but I just like choked because that wasn't the way that I really, you know, that wasn't my best working ability. Like just
Right.
the way he asked the question, and like I don't like really being put on the spot. I really panic. I don't really like taking tests. I'm a bad test taker because I have really bad anxiety. So like all of these things really also like add up to like who I am as a person in the environment that I want to be in. So, what I did was I made a decision to leave that place where I was working. And I had that bad experience with that manager. Like, I didn't want to stay on a team that didn't treat me, that, like, I was made to feel like an idiot rather
Right.
than just trying to approach that conversation differently. Like, I understand that there were expectations of me that perhaps I wasn't meeting, but I think there are ways to meet those expectations or communicate that. And so if you're in a place where you feel uncomfortable by somebody, like, there's other jobs. It's not
Hmm.
worth it. It's not worth staying there. So I think those are like, I think that's a roundabout way of saying, like, it's getting better. There's still going to be problems, but I don't think it's anything to fear. And I think there's a lot more avenues to be communicative and vocal about what is uncomfortable or what is bad. I think there's ways to now bring it up to others where they're listening, so that you can either get out of a bad situation, and then additionally, like, really determine what you want to find yourself in a good situation. And with Zoobean, that was like one of those opportunities for me, was being a part of a team that's like super diverse and really dynamic. And we make educational tech. We make software for libraries and schools to do reading challenges. And to me, it's also nice to be working in a facet of tech that is like helping people. It's encouraging people
Hmm.
to read. So there are opportunities. Not everything is like a big Facebook, or like
Right.
a a Department of Defense gig. But those are there too, and those are accessible as well. I think it's just really like, if you do the work and show up, and if you're uncomfortable in a situation, just vocalize why you're uncomfortable and try to work through that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. All right, one last question for you. I don't want to take up too much of your time. How do you think that we can get more girls interested in tech? Is it do we have to kind of turn it to make it more attractive? How would you say, what's that first step to get? And obviously, we're trying to spread the awareness. That's what we're trying to do here. But what else could we be doing to get more girls
So
interested?
there's like a few different aspects to this. First off is like understanding what roles are in technology. Like, it's not, you don't have, like, a software developer is just one role, right? It's
Hmm.
one role. You can be a quality assurance engineer. You can be a customer support or customer success um, uh, specialist or manager. You can be a user experience researcher. You can be a user interface designer. You can be a front end developer, really making sure that everything that you interact with is happening smoothly. You can be in back end, specifically under the umbrella of software development. In addition to that, we have like cloud computing. Now we have DevOps for in on multiple levels. So not just like internal, but external deployment. Understanding cloud DevOps is really important right now. So there's a lot of like jobs that are out there that, like, you're never going to grow up and be like, I want to be in DevOps. Like, very rarely, you know what I mean? Like, if you
Yeah.
don't, it's like, if you don't know that word, you're not going to know that job exists. And that goes for a lot of women who are already, maybe in other careers that are unhappy. They're like, how can I even break into this if you don't know? So I think it's creating, again, like, making sure people know that, like, these are pathways. This is how much it pays. And again, just being like, well, try to do something and get paid for it. Like, understand how much the value of money means to you. I don't think, like, I drive this home a lot just because, again, I'm like, if I'm working in an ideal world, no, I would not work. I wouldn't work at all. Like, no, I wouldn't do that. I would like do all awesome stuff and like help people. But like, if money was of no consequence, I wouldn't be clocking in somewhere for 40 hours a week. But since I have to, yeah, I want to make it count, and I want to make sure that I make enough to be able to support myself and my family, and not have to rely on people. So I think understanding the value of a dollar for yourself is probably the most important thing you can learn, like in getting into any industry, and then figuring out where in tech that you might want to be. So if it means that you want like a higher, like if you want that like big kahuna cheese money, then then maybe you do have to be a super technical person.
Right.
And it might take a little bit longer. It might be a little bit more targeted work than, being able to managing people, or, doing hiring and recruitment. It's a different skill set, but it doesn't mean that you can't get there.
Right, right. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for all of your advice. I mean, even now, I'm like thinking about life, like, oh, what's my next step? Like, how can I advance, and what other skills can I learn? I think some of the other stuff you said about the language, even I want to learn some of the language. That way, if I ever want to create an app, I can talk to my software developers, be able to say, use that, your language to help you out, to try to explain what exactly I want to do. So thank you so much for taking some time. I'm really excited to share this with some younger high school girls in the area. I really think that it'll help them, spark a light under them, and maybe show them some opportunities that they didn't know before. So I really appreciate your time today. So thank you.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's just like, get money, be independent, because
Yep.
nobody can take those things away from you.
Love it. Love it. I feel like I just had my own like personal TED talk for like the last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I love it.